Welcome back to the Context Coaching Podcast. After 10 months of intense negotiations with his agent, we have finally secured the rights to interview Jarrod Moore, Coach Development Manager at Basketball New South Wales. Obviously, I'm kidding, but we had a few fits and starts, and we're finally here 10 months later after my visit down under. Coach, thanks for jumping on.
No, thanks for having me, Coach Justin. It's an honor to be here. Hopefully, the accent will keep the listeners engaged for sure.
Oh, absolutely, it will. But let's dive in. Take us through the journey, man. How did you end up as the coach development manager at Basketball New South Wales? I'm sure there were a million steps before that. Why don't you take us through, set the tone, ground the audience? Looking forward to this story.
Played high school basketball, not at a very high level here in Sydney, New South Wales. And I was very fortunate to be coached by a master coach considered here in Australia by the name of Coach Rex Nottage, who some American listeners may know due to his many visits overseas. Coach Rex Nottage was my high school coach, got the privilege to learn from him for 4 years. And then as soon as I left high school, on that last day of high school, I said goodbye to coach. And the first thing he said to me was, Jarrod, come coach for me. The next 3 years after I left high school, trying to figure out what I wanted to do in life, which was definitely basketball, but something in it, I built up the passion for wanting to coach and still be a part of the game. First 3 years were really hard. Tried to be like my head coach, realized that's not what coaching is about. And then started casually coaching in North Sydney, the Norths Bears, and started to get some pocket money on the side, just coaching under eights, beginners, under 10s, under 12s, under 16s, under 18s, men, women, you name it, I coached them. And then 4 years later, someone tapped me on the shoulder in 2012 and said, hey, we've got a full-time coaching opportunity for you. It's the development officer at Penrith Panthers basketball, which is in Western Sydney, which is a very blue-collar part of Sydney. And I couldn't say no. So I go out there, work my tail off for 6 years, and I fell in love with the place, just with the work ethic and the integrity of the community out there. And then a club in Werribee tapped me on the shoulder and said, hey, you should apply to be the development officer of basketball in Western Melbourne. I said yes, was out there for 12 months. And then 12 months later, the Basketball New South Wales coach development manager's role popped up. And I thought, why I'm helping 1,000 kids, why not help 1,000 coaches and then reach 10,000 kids? So I said, all right, I'll apply. Back in 2019, applied and I got the job. Here I am listening and helping coaches and kids all in the same, and got addicted to just helping people and really just want to see the game grow. Whether I make the NBA or whether someone else makes the NBA, I really don't care. I just want to push people forward and hopefully it can give them the same feelings that the game continue to gives me, which is a lot of passion and enthusiasm and a lot of goodness. So yeah, that's where I am now, and how funny this has happened. This position allowed us to meet, Coach Justin. So honored.
Yeah, no doubt. And it's funny that our relationship has grown by a casual referral. And then when I was there last summer, I got to spend an hour with you. And then we're coming back out and we're going to see you again and hopefully get your hands on our kids. I want to go back to something that you led with, and I've got a bunch of questions. Number one, I got to meet Rex when I was there. You set me up with that, went over to the school. Fascinating about him, for people that don't know, the guy flies a plane every day to work from an hour and a half north of Sydney, or three. I don't even know how far it is, but dude flies to work every day. It's wild. He pilots his own plane. But you guys can Google that. But I actually really want you to spend as much time as you would like, and in the best way that you feel makes sense, knowing you've been over here and you have an understanding of the landscape over here. But Australian basketball is very different in its setup, meaning things aren't prioritized through the schools, right? Not even all the schools have athletic programs, but the club system, and you mentioned I worked for the North Sydney, then the Panthers. Like, how does the structure of stuff in Australia even work? Because we're going to talk about things that our listeners aren't going to understand unless you give them the groundwork of how athletics even work in Australia.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a couple ways, but the main way that community sport is set up in Australia is that some kids can represent their school, but the majority of kids and coaches represent their region. And these little regions are broken down into things called associations. In New South Wales, which is a state of Australia, which is where Sydney's based. I'm based in Sydney. There's 85 associations across the whole state, and the state is basically the size of Texas. And in this state and all these 85 associations, it's up to the associations to try to set up everything to do with basketball in their community. Everything from beginner classes to a competition, from kids to adults, to like a referee recruitment and development program, as well as like a coach recruitment and development program. And as you can imagine, with all the challenges that there are being such a big state, our associations do their best to recruit volunteers to help out. So it's a very much pay to play kind of system, which has its pros and cons as with any system. The biggest pros that our system does have is that very much coaches and referees do things at a volunteer basis. But as soon as a referee does start to ref games, they do get some pocket money. But 95% of the time, if a coach is getting involved, they're doing it as a volunteer. So a lot of our coaches are full-time mechanics, miners, pilots, lawyers, doctors, surgeons, teachers, you name it. And then on the side, they're coaching basketball as a hobby. We have about 3,500, 4,000 coaches spread out across New South Wales. And then it's up to me to try to determine how can we best educate our coaches. Now, the other 5% of coaches, they're lucky enough to get a full-time, part-time, or casual job coaching basketball. So whether someone pays them cash under the table, or whether a school hires them, or whether an association hires them to be a director of coaching or a development officer, then that's really how you can build yourself up. So you're really starting from ground zero and trying to figure out and network and learn and watch videos and read. And then by the time you start to build a little reputation for yourself, then who knows, a job opportunity might come along where you can then work full time. Kids can get involved that way. And then once they start to play at a community level, they might get identified by the state, which is what I work for, Basketball New South Wales, and we have a high performance program. So the best kids in each region, they can decide to go through a trial. And then our first trial starts at under 14. So 12 and 13-year-olds can get identified whether they have talent or not, but they can get identified to then go into programs that can help refine and nurture their development. And then we make the first New South Wales Metro and New South Wales Country state team at under 16s. Those kids play the national championships, and then Basketball Australia makes the first under 15, under 16, under 17 junior Australian teams. And then they go play at FIBA tournaments, whether it's the Oceania tournament or whether it's the FIBA Asia tournament or the FIBA Worlds, wherever it is. So that's how we set up our kids for success. And if one of these kids does well, then they might get a scholarship to go develop and train at the Centre of Excellence, which is basically the Australian Institute of Sport down in Canberra, which is a 3-hour drive away from Sydney. But if you're up in Byron Bay, which is near the Queensland border, which is still in New South Wales, then it could be a 10-hour drive to get to Canberra. These are the things that we face in our state. And yeah, we have so many magical volunteers working their tails off to help the game grow and help these kids.
Yeah, and that 3-hour drive is fascinating when you're on the wrong side of the road and the wrong side of the car, trying to navigate that like I was. But thanks for that groundwork. Now, how do the schools function? And you could be a little shorter on this, but my takeaway, which was somewhat mind-blowing, was there's basically 3 levels of schools, right? You got state schools, you got the parochial schools, and then you got the independent schools.
Mm.
And the thing that I walked away with that was surprising for me was that the state actually pays the private schools to take kids because they can't necessarily manage them all. Can you give a little primer on how school sports function?
Yeah. So we do have different bodies of schools in New South Wales. So we obviously have the public school system and we have the private school system, but then the private school system is tallied up into like Catholic schools, independent schools, and then greater private schools. So there are some private schools that are incredibly expensive to attend unless you're lucky enough to get a scholarship. Now, a lot of the greater private schools have budgets to then be lucky enough to hire full-time basketball staff and then dish out scholarships to some of these incredibly talented kids. So a lot of these schools, especially the greater private schools, they have their own basketball calendar between term four and term one. And our term four goes between October all the way through to March, and then that's when their season plays. So our kids can play association basketball, but also play the greater private school system basketball season. So that way they're getting extra basketball on top of what they already do. And at the moment, the boys' programs is greater, and then the girls' programs is slowly picking up. In the greater private school system, these kids can go to these systems, and then a lot of these schools have their own basketball facilities and gyms and pools, and then their coaches can take them through the season and develop and refine. And how the funding works, I'm not too sure on, Coach Justin, but I know that the greater public schools, they don't dish out scholarships, and the kids just have to represent their school and be lucky enough to try to progress through a tournament. But then our greater private schools, they're the ones that are known of having more talent. So by the time they have these state championships, they're the ones that are starting to get themselves out of it. But then by the time we get to December, Basketball Australia hosts something called the National Schools Championships. So any school in the country can nominate and play. And then once you play, you can play in your division. And then we will have a national champion for schools. And it's a heap of fun for kids. So that's how our school system plays. But it's detached from the representative association system, but everyone knows about it and the kids know about it. So the biggest challenge for coaches is that they've got to try to manage the workload for kids, especially during that time of the year.
No doubt. That makes sense. All right, last question about structure. And I know when I was there and I visited Tim Hill and Manly, they have, I don't want to call it like an NBL 2 or something. You got the top level pro team, the next level pro team, and then feeders going down. How does that connect with Basketball New South Wales, the association programs? How did the pro teams fit into all this?
Yeah, so that's a separate competition itself. The highest form of basketball in Australia is known as the National Basketball League, the NBL. And on the women's side, it's known as the Women's National Basketball League, or the WNBL. Now, the WNBL is the longest standing women's professional league out of all leagues anywhere in the country. So they've been running for the past 40 or 50 years. And then the NBL has had its heydays in the 90s, had a lull, and now it's just starting to bounce back, and basketball is becoming popular again. So they're private entities now. So the NBL just recently bought out the WNBL, and now it's detached from Basketball Australia. Basketball Australia is the governing body, and now the NBL has set up a national semi-professional competition throughout the whole country known as NBL 1. So the NBL is the nation's biggest league, and now they've broken up to a division below it where every state now runs its own semi-pro league known as NBL 1 North for Northern Territory and Queensland. In New South Wales here, we have NBL 1 East. In Victoria and Tasmania, they have NBL 1 South. In South Australia, they've got NBL 1 South, and in Western Australia, they've got NBL 1 West. So in all these divisions and all these conferences, all these associations do their best to make a team. There could be anywhere between 12 to 16 teams in the conference, and then they play in their conference for about 18 to 20 to 22 games. So while these semi-pro teams are playing, they're playing right now. They'll go from February all the way to August, September. And then the pro leagues will then start in September, October. So right now, I'm head coaching one of these teams known as the Penrith Panthers. We play in NBL 1 East. We'll play 20 games, and then if we're lucky enough, we'll make playoffs and hopefully go to the national finals in at the end of August. And then it's a great way for these associations to develop these juniors and hopefully play for their NBL 1 team. And then funny enough, you won't believe it, Justin, but in the NBL 1 finals that we just had, the Illawarra Hawks were the national champions. The player that was the NBL 1, the NBL MVP, he came out of the NBL 1 East, not from another international league. So one of the best players out of NBL 1 East got a pro contract with an NBL team, the Illawarra Hawks, and he ended up being NBL Finals MVP. So it's just a greater pathway for our kids to come through the leagues, and then you just never know where you'll end up. And we didn't see it as coaches. This kid has talent. He's in his early 20s. And then next minute, he gets a triple double in the NBL 1 finals and unbelievable. Who knows where this kid could end up going? It's unreal what this pathway is setting up for our kids. And the NBL 1 concept is only new. It's only about 4 years old, but it's making other sports jealous. And we couldn't be happier.
Yep. And so, from a comparison standpoint for Americans, this would be similar to the G League or more similar to minor league baseball, where you have triple A, double A, single A, high A, class one, whatever. What
Yeah.
comp would you give it for those of us that need that visual?
Yeah, it'd probably be a lot more closer to the MLB system, where all these pro teams have all these teams underneath them, but they're not run by the pro team, they're run by the associations. But then the talent that you can bring in isn't recruited via a draft, it's completely recruited by the coach and the local talent and your ability to recruit the talent to your club. But then the pro team can call on any talent locally or in any other state. But the thing that NBL 1 is doing fantastically is that it's bringing exposure to all the local talent around the country. So NBL clubs are getting on the phones to these clubs and saying, hey, I like this kid. Can we bring him in as a development player? And then they sign him to a pro contract. And then they can get associated that way. Yeah, if it's like anything, it's much like the MLB, but it doesn't go any lower than AAA.
We're going to pivot now back to coaching stuff. What would you say as you started coaching the younger groups, right? You were U8s, 10, 16, all up and down, however many years you did that.
Yeah.
And then going into more of the association job, right? Which is what you're in now. How would you say that experience prepared you for the work you're doing now in coaching development?
There's no comparison, coach. Like you need to, for me, in order for me to do my job properly, you got to understand what it feels like for a coach at that level, as well as a player. You need to know what a 3-year-old who is interested in basketball but hasn't tried it before on an actual basketball court. You need to know what that looks and feels. You won't know what it's going to be unless you're there. So you always got to lick the bottom of the barrel. I always think that's a good thing. So you got to be on the front lines of the war. You got to hold the bassinet and you got to face the opponents and do the best that you can to build up the courage. It built everything for me. Understanding what it looks like for a 3-year-old beginner, then understanding what it looks like for a 9-year-old talent who's playing multiple sports, who's 6'2" at 9 years old. And you're looking this kid in the eyes and you're thinking, hey, mate, you're pretty good at basketball. Coach, no, I'm playing rugby. Okay, it's okay you're playing rugby, but let's go find some time for you to build up your confidence. And coach, here in Australia, we're starting to see some freakish athletes. And I'm sure it's the same out where you are. But we're starting to see some 12 and 13-year-olds who are 6'4", 6'5", and they're only playing basketball in their backyard, and then a coach walks past. It did everything for me because it taught me how to be a salesman of the game and walking past this 12-year-old and be like, hey, basketball's the most fun game in the world. I disagree. I play volleyball. Oh, you play volleyball. I think that's a bad idea. Like with volleyball, you can make $2 million, but with basketball, you could make $50 million USD and get a free education and get a Nike sponsorship. Which one sounds better? So you're really trying to sell the vision and the landscape of either going to the Olympics or the NBA or going to the Euro League or playing in Japan to this kid at 12 years old that might have something, but also you got to try and make it look cool. And then once they're in there, then you got to sell them on the seeds to success, which are the fundamentals of the game. Hey, man, you've got to learn how to jump stop, how to pivot, how to catch properly, how to pass properly, be ambidextrous, left hand, right hand. catch below your knees, catch above your eyes, and shoot it under pressure, pivot under pressure. So learning to teach them all these fundamentals and then the basic concepts. All right, here's how you pass and cut. Here's how you post up. This is what you should do if someone talks trash to you. People are going to scream some mean things and it's going to be okay. This is what you might need to do to win. You might need to elbow someone in the ribs, in their back. That might have to happen sometimes. You might have to play some chin music on a pivot if you're stuck in the post, and you might accidentally cop someone in the chin, and their tooth might come flying out. That will happen, and that's okay. So we've got to teach this person the fundamentals, but then eventually down the path, once they grow their confidence, you got to teach them how to win. And sometimes winning is painful, whether it's painful for you or whether it's painful for someone else. But in Australian basketball, if you're causing pain on the basketball court, then at the end of the game, you always go up to the opponent and you shake their hand and say, "Good game, mate. I tried my best. I know you tried your best, but after this, we might go to the pub and have a beer." But if you're under the age of 18, you won't do that. But I know in America, you'll be under the age of 21, so don't do that at all. Just wait till you're 21 because we want to set you up for life success, not jail times.
Oh, it's so good. On that note, the funny thing is, right, what was interesting to me when I was there, my mother's side of the family, you know this from Perth, and I went and visited some cousins for a week before I came and saw you. And my cousin, who is my age, was coming back from a field hockey game. And I'm like, what? Oh, like you guys play until whenever, right? So like the camaraderie piece of, yeah, we're gonna go compete and then go hang out after the game is real, even into
Yeah.
adulthood in
Mm.
Australian culture. How would you say that trickles down into the youth sports in regards to you're competing regionally? And I don't know if you have rivalry stuff the same way American schools do, but like, how would
Mm.
you say just that culture of like sport for life impacts the youth levels?
Yeah, Australia is a very competitive country with such a small population. Like in every little thing we do, and there's pros and cons to it, but from a very young age, kids are taught that winning is the best thing that you could do. And it works also against us because it could also bring up a culture of entitlement, and which is completely normal in our culture. And we try to educate our kids about that. It's good to win, but sometimes you don't always have to fight for it. And sometimes you got to know when to separate. So the way that it works, we have a multitude of sport. And I know you guys know as competitors yourself, every time Australia goes to the Olympics, we're very typically always in the top 10, and we only have a population of about 25 million people. So from a very young age, kids are taught how to swim. Kids are taught how to fall over, get up, get over your tears, pick up a ball, catch a ball, throw a ball. And it's very interesting in Australia for having such a small population and so much space. Our kids like to run and jump. And it's very common in the classroom if they can get very fidgety. So that's why we like to play a lot of outdoor sports. So we're playing AFL, we're playing netball, which is outdoor at the beginning. We're playing field hockey. There's no ice here in Australia unless you go to Mount Kosciuszko in the winter. So there's no ice hockey here. We do have ice rinks. So ice hockey is a very small sport in Australia. But we're out in the fields, we're running, we're jumping, we're punching, we're kicking, and all these things happen. So at a young age, we have sports that try to recruit kids at 3 years old. So we have soccer clubs teaching these kids. Sometimes it's a good thing, sometimes it's a bad thing. We also have clubs that are teaching kids how to play basketball at 3 years old. And then we have basketball competitions at under eights, at five, sixes, and sevens. And so one of the things that has been going on social media recently, and I'm sure the same things happen in America, but it's not a good thing, but there are starting to be parent fights at junior events. And that's where the separator needs to be very clear. It's like this is healthy competition, but parents, you don't have to take it personally. Australian clubs and the Australian culture is starting to realize, okay, how can we separate this winning and this losing, and then still at the end of the day get people to shake hands? The way it operates in Australian culture, coach, is we have all these competitions and all these sports, and then parents are just trying to expose their kids to a whole bunch of things because it is healthy in science to get their kids to try a whole bunch of different things. But now it's You need to find the separator. All these kids are playing these things, and now, all right, the winning and losing is fine, but now don't take it personally. Yeah,
which is
yeah.
hard
Your kid
sometimes.
doesn't have to be number one all the time.
What did Ricky Bobby say? If you're not first, you're last, right?
That's right. Yes.
If we go, let's get to some basketball now that we got the foundational blueprint of Aussie culture. As a coach development manager, you probably get to see more instruction than you can imagine. And what I'm always curious about, and more so here, and I'm curious how it plays out there, I always ask the question of what have you learned by watching other sports and other people teach different disciplines? But in your role, you've got a gazillion people you're overseeing. What are some of the things recently, I don't know, let's say in the last year since I saw you, that you've seen that are really intriguing that you've started to adopt in regards to teaching the game? Doesn't have to be scheme. Doesn't have to be X's and O's. Doesn't have to be fundamentals, but just things where it's, oh man, because I get access to all this stuff, I have an accelerated growth curve and I can
Mm,
play with things and get in the lab and figure some things out. But what are some things you found in the last year to be super successful that you would offer up to anyone?
very good question. How can I encapsulate this? I'll start out by saying the master coaches that I've got to spend time with and meet and talk to have an incredible ability of authenticity. And the best ones not only have the authenticity, but a very clear understanding of why they're doing things. The why. There's not this stigma from these coaches that they're trying to be like anyone else, but they have a very clear idea of who they are and they're comfortable with, but also even through their own learning journey, they've tried things and discussed things and succeeded and failed and thought, no, this is why I'm doing it, Jarrod, and this is what I've decided on. I don't care what anyone else says. This is the way that I'm going to do it. And it's incredibly impressive watching these particular coaches do it because then you walk away thinking it's not what they're doing that is impressive. It's them as a person and them understanding why they're doing it. And it was actually a Gino Auriemma coaches clinic that triggered this thought on me. But Gino Auriemma started a coaching clinic saying Coach Bobby Knight ruined more coaching careers than he created because you would be so inspired after watching Coach Bobby Knight that you would go home thinking, I need to be like Coach Bobby Knight. But I'm sure if you spoke to a lot of his former athletes, a lot of his former athletes would die on a hill for him because that was the hardest thing that they ever did in their life. And I walked away from that coaching clinic, which I watched on Championship Productions, and I thought, holy crap, I need to do more soul searching than I need to do more content searching. Over these past 10 years, coach, if there's anything that I've learned, it's been the Jarrod, discover who you are, double down on that, coach what your gut says, but whatever you coach, make sure you are very clear on why you're doing it. In my own coaching journey, sometimes I can be rash and I'm just doing it because it looks cool. But then there's a lot of times my athletes will be like, Jarrod, what are we doing this for? And I'm like, great question. Thank you, athlete. Thank you, athlete, for giving me that feedback. I'm not going to punish you because you're making me a better coach. At the end of the day, we're coaching because of them. We're coaching not because we want to drive a Ferrari one day. If you want to drive a Ferrari, go be a real estate agent because the market in Sydney is unbelievable. But yeah, coach. It's the authenticity. It's the at least I get to see these drills. And then as I see these master coaches share these drills, then it's okay, let me understand why they're using these drills. And then I can share these drills with the rest of the coaches. But at least I get like a little head start. And then I can cater the drill my way. Yeah, coach, like I've been able to get a head start in my job and try things, but I hate not sharing because I just want New South Wales coaches to go to the next level. I want New South Wales coaches to go to the Olympics. I want New South Wales coaches to go to EuroLeague, Pro Japan, Pro China, go to the NBA, go to the G League, go to college. And every time I see a New South Wales coach somewhere in the world or taking the next step as well as player, it is just absolutely magical. There's no greater form of what it can do to the soul. So, yeah, that's the head start it gives me.
Yeah, no, and I love that because especially as a younger is not the right word. and I wouldn't even say, let's call it less experienced, simply in the context of reps, right? You can be 50 and starting this, or you can be 18 like you were starting this, and it's just
Mm.
the journey and the pathway. But as we're newer, that's a better word, profession, let's call it. We're trying on different hats, to your point, to figure out who we are. And the
Mm.
sooner you can get to that authenticity and the why, the easier your job is, because you're not trying to be anybody else. And I think you and I, before we started recording, I made the comment that, look, there's no right, there's no wrong, there's my way. And at the end of the
Mm.
day, I've settled on that.
Yeah.
And my friend and colleague and replacement is figuring out what that is. And that's
Yeah.
part of the journey. So I love the way you frame that. And hopefully this trip is part of that for us. And it made me think while you were talking, what would you say is the hardest thing to teach in the game of basketball or even in sport? And how have you hacked it to make it easier? Right? There's certain things that like we all struggle with, and there are certain things that like we each have the secret sauce for it. We try to share with other people. And I'm curious from your lens, as you start with littles, you got olders now. It's what consistently have you found to be the hardest thing to teach, and what solution have you came up with for delivering that?
And you're talking more personally or more as an observation with other coaches?
Yes, and
Okay. All right.
embrace the power of and coach. It's not an
Personally, I found it challenging. I'm still trying to figure out how to do it with adults. With juniors, I find a little bit easier because I've got way more experience with it. But with adults, I find it challenging to extract that extra 1% effort out of them. Like trying to get them to die on that hill. And that could be the question at the forefront of my mind until the day I die, which I'm completely okay with. But every time I'm coaching these guys, because one thing personally that I've been trying to learn and unlearn and mold is trying to separate coaching the effort and challenging the personal, challenging the person. And another master coach said this to me recently because this individual gets the absolute best out of their athletes and he's almost like a drill sergeant. And when you watch this coach, you might think, wow, this is borderline abusive. But when you talk to him, he understands very clearly what he's doing. Jarrod, every time I talk to him, I'm challenging their effort, but I'm not challenging them as a person. So I'll never challenge them about their hair, about the way they look, about who they are as a person, their opinion, whatever. But as soon as they step on the basketball court and they start to put effort on into something, that's when I start to challenge them. And that's something that I'm trying to learn as a coach. As a younger coach, there were many times, and I catch myself out with this sometimes I might take it too personal. And then the athlete turns at me and says, excuse me. And I'm like, I apologize for that. I didn't mean to take it down that path. And that's something I still need to separate because it's borderline bullying, Coach Justin. And I need to take a step back because I don't want to be in front of my players and make them feel little. I'm trying to uplift them. So that's something that I'm still learning. Now, for other coaches, it's really the same. Like sometimes I still see younger coaches as I watch them, they're going through the same journey. And some coaches get it, some coaches are still learning, but they're still, as they shout at their players, and it's it just came to me, the emotional stability coach. The emotional stability. That is one of the hardest things to teach. And I learned that from the Serbians. And the Serbians are incredible at X's and O's and technical and tactical things, but they're still going through the journey of teaching their coaches how to be emotionally stable. Because once we cross that line of emotional instability, then that's when you cross the border of attacking the person as well as challenging their effort. And it happens all the time. It happens all the time. So I find that challenging to teach. The X's and O's, skills, the fundamentals, the free throws, the technique, all of that you can learn on the internet. All of that you can learn on the internet. But the effort and the attacking the person as an individual and dividing the effort and the abuse, that stuff can only happen authentically, I think, because people say things different ways and people feel things different ways. So we're just trying to teach our coaches how to be a lot more empathetic, how to listen with the ears, how to listen with the eyes, but also, hey, coach, just chill. Like they were late. You don't need to abuse them for being late. Ask them why they were late. Why were you late, player? I was late because my mum's busy, my dad's busy. I had to catch a bus. The bus was packed. I had to catch the next bus, and there was someone who was drunk on the bus, and I had to avoid them. The bus driver stopped. He kicked them out, and that's why I'm half an hour late, coach. Thank you for putting in the effort to get here, mate. Get in, do your best, and let's talk after, and let's find someone to take you home. So, yeah, listening, coach, separating the emotional stability, not making it personal, but then trying to figure out how to get the best out of your athletes. Coach, that's the hardest thing to teach.
Yeah, no, I love that response. And the frame at the end, all of us at some point in our life have jumped to the discipline or the consequence rather than, hey man, are you all right?
Yeah,
No,
yeah,
actually, it's been horrible. I'm lucky to be here right now. Okay, great. Let's
yes,
get in a drill and forget about it, right?
yes.
Why do you think, and I'll give you my perspective, I'm curious on yours, that it's harder to extract, and I'm going to use air quotes for people who can't see me, effort out of adults or older players versus younger players? B, our perception of effort clouds what's really happening. And the example I'll use is me as a 50-year-old working out these days relative to somebody else that's a little bit younger and we're doing the same workout and they end up vomiting. And it's, yeah, I don't do that. Why not? Because I know how to modulate where I'm at and give appropriate effort for the appropriate time and
Yeah,
how to rest when needed rather than just being at 100% of the time. How do
yeah,
you gauge that piece in regards to extracting effort or
yeah.
the idea of false hustle, all of that stuff?
Yeah, great question. I learned this from another coach, but it always comes down to the and who and why equals what plus how. Who and why equals what plus how. Who are you dealing with and why are they playing? If they're an adult coming to a beginner program and they just want to learn some skills, then I probably wouldn't put them on the baseline or the sideline to run 17s in a minute. If it was a 23-year-old who wanted to play NBL 1 and they said to me, Jarrod, I want to make it to the NBL and I want to play in the NBA someday. Okay, mate, this needs to be the hardest thing you've ever done. But we're not going to make it personal. All right. It might look abusive from the outside, but we're going to build up a relationship. We're going to push you really hard. If we cross the line somewhere, make sure you tell us. But I'm not going to kick you out of the stadium and not at least have a conversation with you. But the door is always there for you to enter and to exit as well. So it's the who plus why. So that conversation needs to start at the beginning. And then that equals the what plus how. This is what we're going to do. This is how we're going to do it. You're going to get up 4 a.m. every day. If you want to be like Kobe Bryant, you got to get up at 3:30. All right. And then you're doing like 4 workouts a day. If you need the sleep, find the sleep in your own time. Oh, coach, I don't have the time. I've got a pregnant girlfriend. I've got a job. Oh, that's for you to figure out, man. I'm here to help you. You told me you want to make the NBA. Sacrifices have to be made. So there are like different levels, and you can gauge that at what they're coming to trial to. Coach, I'm coming here I just want to learn how to dribble 3 basketballs at the same time. That's cool, man. You want to play for the Harlem Globetrotters? Let's start with tennis balls. That's completely fine. Getting that gauge very early on. If you're coaching NBL 1, it's obvious what your gauge is. You guys want to play semi-pro. If you want to play semi-pro, you're either just trying to play the most challenging level of local representative basketball or you're striving to play in the NBL or further. All right. So let's get on the same page with that. If it's Aussie hoops and it's under 10s beginners, then it's all right, boys and girls. Basketball is fun. Let me sell it to you. It's fun because once you hear that first swish, ah, It's like opening a can of Sprite or Coca-Cola. There's just something about that carbonic acid just exploding out of that little tin crack that just gets you hooked. Yeah, yeah, coach. It's definitely starts with that conversation, and then you can map out the framework from there.
Yeah, no, I like that equation. I actually wrote it down. I'm gonna put it on my wall. That made the whole hour worth it just for that. That's a great share. Who did you hear that from, and what was the context in which you've now adopted that?
All credit to Coach Alan Keane, who is a basketball coach in the United Kingdom, and he's a great coach educator. He shared that with Australian coaches a few years ago, and it just provided a great framework for coaches to be empathetic and understanding what they're building before they actually do it.
No, I love that. That's a great share. Thank you for that. All right, going back to some more self-exploration. What is something that you have most recently changed your mind on? And I
Mm.
don't know what Australian politics are like, but here in the States, we have become a very polarized country over the last, let's call it 9 years, to where most people live in an echo chamber just re-supporting their held beliefs, right? And so it's up
Yep.
to us to challenge our belief system, to have
Yes.
growth mindset, to say, hey, does this still hold true? Or
Yep.
is it because this is what I've always believed, right? So I think this is always a good question to talk through. It's, hey, I used to believe this, but now I'm over here and here's why. And it was intentional. And it doesn't
Yep.
have to be basketball related. It can be something else, but I'm always curious how us as leaders and as developers of other humans are challenging our own belief system.
Yeah. Yeah. Something that I changed my mind on recently, coach, is being okay with the boredom. Because we very much, in Australia, we very much educate our coaches to try and be as efficient as possible in training. We've got to engage our athletes. We need to add layers to our drills. We need to be okay with the mess. And that is a very healthy message. But then sometimes you need to slow down the teaching. And then when you slow down teaching, it can be boring. Boys and girls, we are doing shooting form for 45 minutes because of this. All right, let's go fix it. Then you walk around each athlete, spend 5 to 10 minutes on it. And then if you see a kid on the other side of the court while you're giving feedback to someone and they're disengaged, you don't need to scream at them. Just, hey, keep going. It's okay to be bored. The boredom is still getting you better at something. Focus. Because something that we're seeing with kids is we're starting to see them get too distracted. But we still have to remember that if you want to be really good at something, sometimes it's okay to be just a hammer instead of a Swiss Army knife. All right. And this is the discussion about the positionless basketball. We're starting to see a whole range of players do everything. We're starting to see 7 foot 3 point guards. We're starting to see 6 foot 9 five men. But eventually, I think it'll swing back around, coach. I think we will have so many Swiss Army knives that someone just wants a hammer, something that can just do the job to get the nail in. Okay, Shaquille O'Neal, who is 250 kilograms at 6 foot 11. You just get down on the block. That tall, skinny French kid who's 7 foot 5 can do everything. Just beat him down in the low block. And then when you pivot, just get him underneath the ribs. Let's get him to get in a crouch position so he can get smaller. Oh, now we're starting to get some more hammers. All right, future John Stockton. You're the most mentally tough point guard in the league, and you're only 6 foot 1. That 6 foot 7 point guard, pick him up 94 feet. If you want to talk some smack, that's fine. Make sure it's not personal and you shake his hand at the end of the game, but you're under his nostrils for the whole game. The whole game. Do you understand that, future John Stockton? Yes, coach, I understand. Good for you, mate. Good for you. So the thing that I'm starting to track back on is it's okay to be bored and focused on something, but then balance out. Okay, engagement. Let's learn everything, boys and girls. All right, now let's focus. All right. Sometimes focus is boring. All right, and you're gonna get distracted by the butterflies. It's okay to be distracted by butterflies, but then once you see that, get back on task.
And that's like you're almost hacking people's meditative approach, right? Where you just redirect and let them just kind of work through the mess. And I love that part, right? Slow down the teaching because we're always trying to be efficient. We're always trying to
Mhm.
be engaged. And that's to my point earlier about figuring out, hey, this is what we do, but I've had to make some tweaks. And part of it is
Mhm.
always go be messy. It's all good. We'll figure it out to where some of the athletes this year were like, yo, can we just stop and do this so I can understand it? And it's like,
Properly.
no, you'll figure it.
Yes.
And this is a great message for me in my own space going through some of this. All right, we're getting close, and I want to continue to pick some of your gems. You've thrown a couple out in the last 10 minutes that are golden nuggets here. If you were giving a TED talk on whatever subject you think is important, what's something that we missed that you would like to get out there into the universe from a sharing standpoint?
If I had to give a TED talk or anything and give advice to my younger self and all that wish wash,
Yep.
be way more courageous and be bold. I would really grab myself by the shoulders and say, be bold, Jarrod, be bold. And you're going to get the feelings of it's going to feel like you're the odd one out. It's going to feel scary. It's going to feel like people are going to stare at you and they're going to think all these crazy things about you. Jarrod, it doesn't matter. It does not matter. The people who matter most in your life love you and are honest with you already. All right. And they're going to hang around. Say, give that person that honest feedback. Speak to the most beautiful girl in the club. Try that drill. Go up to Coach Greg Popovich and tap him on the shoulder and introduce yourself. Go up to that CEO and ask him for a sponsorship. Go up to that car salesman and say, 25,000. Are you crazy? I'm giving you 7,500. Be bold. Be who you are. Be who you are. And if you ever feel scared, don't run away from it. That's a good thing because that is where the most growth will happen. So, Jarrod, be bold and courageous. You got this.
I love that. That's a great way to end, man. Hey, I appreciate you taking the time. I'm glad we finally were able to do this, and I'm looking forward to bringing our kids out there to let you teach them something.
No, I appreciate you having me on. And if any coach wants to reach out, you can get me on Twitter, on Instagram. Just look up Coach Jarrod Moore or email me at Jarrod Moore, jarrod.moore@bnsw.com.au. Jarrod spelled Jarrod, Moore spelled Moore. Hopefully we can keep up the conversations and please anyone reach out. Love talking the game and I'm sure our friendship will continue, Coach Justin.
Absolutely. I'm looking forward to it. Talk soon.
Will do. See you, mate.